I actually have a little epilogue. I have a little epilogue I'd like to say after the show, about the show, if it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
It's some stuff that came up during the meetings of the Sphere. And I thought it might be relevant just to say really fast while you're all here and have seen my show. So it's not so long, but it will get comfortable.
I think Jim's here now.
Uh-huh.
Just try to come in just before you.
Ah. Yeah. Sure. No, is he coming? Is what's happening?
Okay.
Oh, it's there.
No, yes.
It's him?
Hey, maybe.
Is this the show that you were supposed to be on tour now? The one for schools?
No, this is just a bunch of stuff I made for the Sphere.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
so you can do the epilogue
It's
now.
really the first time I've done
Really?
half of it. Oh, yeah, for real. Yeah.
Oh, it's so amazing.
So I just want to say really fast one thing, and this came from the Reimers Home Hotel meeting in September that I got to hang out for a little bit. But I wanted to say one thing about circus and risk, because there is this romantic notion, or romantic, I don't know, but this idea that circus is about risk, and that circus artists take risk. And there's also been a trend lately about circus becoming, into the academic field and meeting other art forms. And in those discussions, you want to have a good conversation with other art forms. You want to feel like you're on the same level as, I don't know, dance or painting or whatever, biochemistry, I don't know. You want to be relevant, right? And so there's been a few things like the PhD program here in Stockholm for circus. And there's been on Facebook a group called Circademics, circus academics, I guess. Not circus pandemics, which my friend thought circademic, but circus academic. And the only discourse I've seen around the subject of circus in these more intellectual academic areas is about this idea that circus encapsulates risk. And I just wanted to say that in my viewpoint, circus is absolutely not about risk. It is in fact the opposite of risk. Let me explain that, because yeah, there is inherent risk in what we do. Henrik and Louise yesterday, Louise could have fallen, broke her neck and died. Sure, but you know what? Driving here today, if you drove in a car, you could have also died. It's a risk. In fact, the chance that the audience will get injured or killed is way greater than the circus artist in the show to get injured or killed. And the reason is because we spend our whole lives practicing to not have risk. It drives me crazy when people say circus is about risk and we take risk and that risk is what we're working with. Like, I'm not working with risk in terms of the content of my performance. Yes, there is risk. I could have dropped the objects. I could have fallen over. I could have gotten electrocuted, to be honest, today. But the whole point is that I practice so that I don't die. And I practice again and again. You see Henrik and Louise with their video. They practice for 20 years so they don't die. And in the juggling example I can give you that's very clear is this. The juggler in the street show, or street show is a good example, easy example. They say, I'm gonna juggle this razor sharp knife. And now you got two choices. Either that knife is actually razor sharp, and then you're a fucking idiot to juggle it. And that's not a joke. I've had a friend who got cut super badly because they were stupid and they juggled a razor sharp knife. So either they're saying, this knife, I'm going to juggle a razor sharp knife, and then you just have two choices. Either that person is lying in a theatrical way, and I'm not saying that's bad, but it's a theatrical layer. It's not the reality. The reality is the knife is not sharp, unless you're stupid. I'm really serious. So, I mean, I don't want to get into the idea of ethics and morals about risking your life for art. I personally don't think it's an ethical or moral thing to do. To predicate the base form of the content of my art, that you will watch me do my art so that I might die. I don't think it's an ethical or moral position to put an audience in personally. I don't need to get in an argument about ethics or morals, but it does bring that up for me. And so, so just to end the rant, just to sum up, and I'll say, there is risk in circus, but there's risk in crossing the road. And I think of any sort of artist or art form or discipline, circus artists limit risk and work to not have risk, instead of being like, oh, what I do is all about risk. There is a theatrical layer to that. We can talk about commercialism and selling and politics and positioning yourself and having an image. But in reality, I think, at least for me, circus artist, I think risk is the least interesting thing about what I do. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about
Please,
this?
yeah.
Being half new to circus, is that when risk is mentioned in circus, I don't actually see the life-threatening part of the risk. I see the two interesting risks of the wording of either the one that we discussed for the economy students met circus artists, and the economy students learned there were consequences. So the risk-taking was actually the planning and awareness of the situation. So it's actually the opposite, like the security thought of the consequences are rather the awareness of risk and thereby avoiding it.
Mm.
So they were influenced by the long-term consequences that they never then were aware of, because they want to quick and think the life is quick. So they were made aware of the risk being part of life by other people being aware of risk, but also the risk of failure, because what fascinates me is not giving up practicing. The risk of not succeeding and still practicing fascinates me, that they did it for 20 years, because they might never have learned it. And what is it that makes it that not being ashamed of failure in a society where we're supposed to be effective and perfect? So
Sure. There's a lot of different
risk, but it's not the risk.
But there's lots of
dying risk.
Sure. Great. Yeah, I mean, I can clarify a little bit just to make sure that I'm making any sense. But I mean, it is a language game, and we can start to define what risk on what metaphorical level or like what philosophical level, which is all valid. And I'm saying when people go on circademics and they start to speak about the quality that circus has, that's why we're here, is risk. I really think it's the last thing I'm just saying it's the last thing I would ever talk about in terms of, there's so many more things in my work that I would like to talk about before risk in terms of expression. And this is a terrible analogy. I mean, this is like a cheating analogy because it's so overly simplistic and whatever. But when you meet a painter, the question is, oh, you're a painter. Oh, what do you paint? Right? You never say, oh, you're a painter. Do you use a really big brush to make really small strokes that if you have a slip of the wrist, you'll fuck up the painting? Like, there's no, like, but, oh, you're a juggler, you juggle chainsaws. Or you're a circus person, oh, do you do those flips? And I think there's a discourse where I just want to say we trade a little bit upon that. The street performer definitely trades upon that in a good way to get money in the hat. I'm going to juggle a razor sharp knife. I mean, I get it. I'm not judging that. But I'm saying in terms of reality, we have to be clear what we're talking about. And I've only ever heard in the past 2 years in an academic setting, the only valid way to justify circus being in academia has been through this analysis of risk and kind of this analogy of risk. And that's a little bit frustrating to me because I just find so many other worthwhile things to talk about in risk. I just wanted to bring that up. And I think it would be very, very cool to figure out what are those other things to talk about with circus other than risk in a real concrete way, which I just haven't seen publicly before. Like I've tried to talk with some friends about it. But like publicly, I don't see a big discussion about it. So that was my rant after my show of a bunch of different stuff that maybe wasn't exactly about risk of, oh, is he going to drop or not? Which is normally what a lot of which is kind of where the analysis ends many times.
There's a question in the not in the meat space, but on the other place, in the computer.
Yes, from the computer. Yeah, I was thinking it's also about pushing the possibility of space of complex order. So and in sort of conquering even more complex chaos. If you're looking at the risk, but looking at it just in terms of risk is really unacademic, and it's really short-sighted and really shallow. And I empathize with your view on the audience. I as an audience member, I really have felt sort of like I've assumed a corrupt position if someone is performing at great risk to themselves in front of me. I find that a really awkward, odd position that I'm involuntarily sort of brought into. But I think it's also about the value. You see the discourse lifting a value that you think is non-valid. And again, it's about articulating the value. So if going forward, if we could think how you would like to articulate the value of what it is you're actually doing, the unique value of not risk, but how you would like to articulate that, then that would be important for us to manifest.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I just think there's two conversations happening a lot of times as an artist. And there's the public conversation where you position yourself politically and commercially to survive. And then there's the private conversation. I have no problem with those conversations being different. Again, I'm going to juggle a razor sharp knife. That's cool. But I think the danger becomes when the artist starts to believe the public conversation that when you're positioning yourself as a whatever you want to be, an intellectual or a daredevil or even a emotional, whatever on the spectrum. It's just when the external conversation and the internal conversation don't match up. I think there's a risk that you're going to be in trouble. And then just again to what you were saying, that the public discourse would be so nice that it was, like you were saying, elevated a little bit beyond just the mere like, oh, circus people, they might break their neck, or the juggler might drop, and of course I'm being a little bit, generalizing too much, but that is kind of the level of the conversation. If you look around what's out there in academia right now, I can point you to a few videos about risk and a few Facebook posts that's what it's about.
I'm thinking also it's really different in different disciplines. I mean, thinking it's also different. Circus is difficult in the sense that it's multidisciplinary. Circus is what's happened in the meeting between. It depends how you see it. The circus practice, it's often connected to a certain circus discipline, like judging, for instance. When I see Henrik and Louise yesterday, and this discussion, the honest discussion afterwards, I was really struck by what Laura Lotti said today, like whose skin in what game, or whose skin in whose game, just like who is actually. I see the 20 years they've spent, and I see how they are like they gain so much life experience and traveling and cool stuff and so on. But for who, because there's also there's a tragedy in what they presented also, and it was also so strong, the relationship and trust part in their discipline. It's difficult to go away from that for me. Like, of course, it's a joint. They take a risk in some way, but more than that, the way that he trusts her, he trusts himself, she trusts him, and how they want to present it also in the context of the show yesterday. It was it was what the private discussion would basically was happening was really about the relationship and trust that they were showing.
Sure, but the context too of that piece was in an academic setting, right? For Louise's master's work, maybe, or something.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not saying, I'm again totally not judging that or giving a value about the content they wanted to present, but again, that was in a very specific context, maybe that highlighted those layers intentionally, like you're saying. It was about that, like on purpose. And I'm saying most of the time, like I had a 3-hour discussion with a media, let's say somebody from the media, let's just say that. And it was 3 hours talking about, you know, juggling and deep thoughts about life and juggling and things. And at the end of it, the comment was made, oh, I've seen that juggling with pendulums where the balls are on strings hanging from the ceiling. And it's so boring because you just can't draw. It's just like, oh, 3 hours of trying to explain about expression and different types of layers and beyond technique and why are we here? And then you still end up with that kind of mentality of like, oh, the juggler can't drop the ball, therefore it's not worth talking about. And I was just so frustrated with the process, just as an example.
Yeah, maybe I can say something too, because I'm glad you're talking about this element of kind of the fetishization of risk in circus, and it's definitely been my experience in Montreal as well in the research side of things. And what I find like so strange about that, not only that it doesn't get at the expressive element, but the political part that I notice, and this is kind of getting into, I guess, the context, at least in North America, of circus, like, is that the funding related to these studies on risk, you know, that has an artistic component because it's circus or because we're interested in research creation. But the funding, usually 75% of it in Quebec, comes from sports industry, which is interested in how far you can push the body, which is not, they're not trying to figure out how to do that on behalf of the artist. They're trying to do that on behalf of the extension of the industry and the profit model, which is kind of what we're trying to do differently here. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that.
Cool. Well, what did you guys have planned now? Did you have a...
Actually,
No, we have a
Joel
Yeah.
is the next speaker.
Yeah.
And he's going to talk about the game of loops.
Yeah.
Which is such a fantastic segue of what you did. Just want to say in French, to say putting something at stake, you say putting something into play, at play, en jeu. And that would be a way to open up perhaps a question of risk towards something that's more systemic. Because what I love juggling, and I love the way you deconstructed the time that you put into a system and then time unraveling within a given system. It's so expressive indeed. And yeah, it's like a game that we created, Joel and I. It's called the Interspecies Token game, and the motto was a game that allows you to play. And it's how it feels after watching you. It's like you open up possibilities of playing because you set systems into motion. And I feel like for the sphere, I don't want to bring back everything to it, but it's like it's an attempt at playing with system, or like what does it mean to organize ourselves differently. If you ask experts in organization, they will produce models of what is the right organization, you know, and they will show you it needs to go this way, or if you want to make money, you make money circulates in this way. And my hope for the sphere is that the organization is about putting ourselves at stake so that we produce a system that has its own decay function embedded in it, and we are the one decaying. So who's skinning who's game? Well, it's a game of our own choosing in our own conception.